Are you? Let me know when you're ready. Are you all ready, or? But in the last decade, I've shifted here. But it's been a wonderful, exhilarating 2 weeks. I came back 2 weeks just to help with the election and to try to see whatever little I can do for the presidential candidate, Raila Odinga, with whom I worked for many years. So very, very glad to be here, received a wonderful welcome. Went all through Nairobi, went to Kisumu, went to Busia in the rural areas, and the reception I received is just so nice. People don't forget, Kenyans don't forget just because you're away. But I should mention there was one not very warm welcome that I got from a newspaper article in the Star by Joe Adama or Matthew Gasagira. Some of you might have read it, but it was very, very harsh about me. Do read it and see what it says. But anyway, we are here now to talk about the IABC register. And I want to say at the outset that this new register does not restore confidence in the IABC as far as NASA is concerned. There are just too many problems with it. But let me begin with a more positive note. One thing that stands out in the new register is a very large increase in voters. And I think, partly it is because Kenyans are keener, much keener now than ever before to vote and to determine who they want to be their president. But there's another reason why there is such a large increase, which is that before the last election, there were numerous clashes, ethnic clashes, in Tana River, in Samburu, in Isiolo, in Kwale, Turkana, and other places. Those clashes were very costly in life and property, but they also depressed registration numbers, and indeed, they severely repressed election turnout. So the fact that we have such a large increase in voter registration is a testament to the tranquility we enjoy before the election. And that is something we should all be very grateful for. But I should also say that in this large increase, which we have not carefully studied yet, because this is just a preliminary response by NASA, there could be other hidden problems that we are sensing might be there. And we will report on that if necessary later. So let me look at what is worrying about the IABC, the new register. The first issue is preparedness. IABC has had months and in other senses years to come to this point of where they put out the register. And yet, despite all this preparedness, 2 days after the release of the register, they suddenly had to withdraw it. And you know the reason why. Because that short code 70,000 was not working. So Kenyans, in their zeal, to participate in this election, had immediately gone to their cell phones and computers, etc., to check it out. And what did they discover? They discovered that they were seeing information that was not accurate, that did not belong to them, by using their code. They also saw that, or we also saw, that the names of voters who had died as long ago as 2013 were still on the register, while other voters had registered using ID cards, card numbers that belonged to other Kenyans. As you know, the law prohibits the using of an ID number or giving an ID number of a person who has died to a living person. So clearly there is some fraud in this register. To give you concrete examples, the numbers 0, 003, and 006 of the short code all return particulars of alleged voters who do not exist. More perplexing, searches using some ID numbers of dead relatives of our own NASA Secretariat staff showed that some of those numbers were assigned to other voters. Again, no number can be used another time. So it seems that there are now some or many dead voters that are on that register, which is of course fraud. This fraud and other shortcomings in this register are just unacceptable. The register lies at the very heart of a free, fair and peaceful election. The register is the last and most important thing before the actual polling takes place. So the register lies at the heart of the entire election process and therefore at the heart of democracy. After two deeply tainted elections, Kenyans were now expecting one which is trouble-free and scandal-free. But we are seeing a process which is mired by controversies similar to the one we saw in 2013. With only 1 month to go to this historic election, top officials of the IEBC are clearly losing their grasp of the administrative work needed to deliver a good election. Earlier, we had seen other problems such as irregular procurement, lack of testing of vital electoral materials and equipment, and appointment of officials with divided loyalties. NASA therefore demands that a dry run of the electronic voter ID system, EVID, be conducted as soon as possible. This is absolutely essential because, as you remember from the last election, all electronic systems failed on the first day of the election, making us resort to a process that no one had paid too much attention to, the secondary process. So we demand that this dry run take place as soon as possible. We worry that the IEBC is treading the path of its predecessors, where too often its positions reflect those of Jubilee rather than those that are required by law and in the interest of all Kenyans. The fact is that these problems remain unresolved even after a forensic audit of the register by KPMG, as required by Section 8A of Election Laws Act No. 36 of 2016. And that can only mean that the Commission has not cleaned the register as required by the law and in the manner required by the law. We've also received credible information that the IEBC chairman has quietly reinstated the director of ICT, Mr. James Muhati, who was suspended last month for allegedly interfering in the audit of the register. While the suspension was publicly announced by the chairman, his reinstatement seems to have been done entirely in the dark, with Kenyans not knowing as to whether he was properly investigated before he was reinstated. The Commission had promised that it would investigate him before it made a final decision. But we have no idea, Kenyans have no idea if that investigation was done and by whom. We also have information that the Commission plans to split the register into 13 geographical regions, apparently because the EVID, acquired at such huge expense, as you all know, has no capacity to carry the entire register. So we, in fact, purchased equipment and tools which cannot even contain the entire register. But be that as it may, that register has been split now into 13 regions. But those regions overlap with other jurisdictions. They do not, for example, they could have been limited to one county. Instead, they overlap counties, which seems bizarre. It doesn't seem to make sense. Why should it be done that way? So we want to know more about that. So in the end, this is what NASA demands. IEBC should release the KPMG report. That report was required by law. It was paid for by all of us. Public expense. Why has it not been released? This is unacceptable. Then, most of you are probably aware of the Integrated Population Register Service Database, IPRS, which contains the most up-to-date information on deaths, births, and marriages, etc. Banks, large institutions, embassies, all of them use this. But the IBC refused to use this register, to use that service, the integrated service. We asked IEBC to immediately check its database against this service. After that is done, the Commission should state that this is the final register. There is time to do that. The IBC should also clearly state what complementary measures it will use in case of electronic failure. We do not want, as has happened in the previous election, a case of green books, black books, and special registers. There should be one unified register, and if there are any other, all of us should know it before the election takes place, so that we can scrutinize it and vet it. Mr. Muhati should also remain under suspension until we know how and by whom he was cleared. Even as we demand answers to these questions, NASA wants to hail the Court of Appeal ruling, the very historic Court of Appeal ruling, affirming that results declared at the polling stations are final. This is a huge victory for both transparency and credibility, and it will encourage higher turnout than was anticipated. And while we celebrate this new ruling, we are cognizant that we still need to take every measure to ensure that the votes that are cast are protected according to the law. And in that regard, I think all of you know, and I want to emphasize, our Adopt the Poll program, which gives an opportunity to our supporters, party members, and others who want a free election to contribute to that adoption. In closing, we demand that IEBC call a meeting with the major political parties in the coming weeks to agree on all the steps that are needed in this last 5 weeks to ensure an election based on agreements that all political parties subscribe to. NASA will give such deliberations its fullest support. Thank you. I should mention, by the way, my name is Salim Lone, and next to me is Adam Zolo. I think you know who I am, and I think all of you know who Professor Adam Zolo is as well. Shoot.
Any questions?
Wow. You agree with everything NASA says. What more do we want? Yes. Go ahead.
My name is Dave.
From the Star? Welcome.
There's this IPRS. Are you demanding for a clean audit of the register against the IPRS data?
Yes. IEBC can do that easily. It is not a complicated process. They should do it. Yes. It is not a time-consuming process. It will take weeks. So I think it's important that it be done. Go ahead. Oh, so sorry. I can talk to you separately, after this. Sure. Oh, that's very good. I'm very happy. Thank you all.
Okay. I think the only thing we can add is that every other time that the IEBC has put up a number for voters in this country, and you remember the last time was during the voter registration process, and after we find duplicates or we find numbers or IDs that don't exist producing voters, they always pull it down. Why? Why can't they just be explaining the anomalies? How come that every time once citizens of this country test their own system that they have voluntary and on their own volition provided, and it comes up with problems, they always pull it down? What are they hiding? Is it that they don't want more numbers to be exposed every other time? I think Kenyans are watching and are seeing that there is mischief, because if you have no mischief, let as many Kenyans demonstrate and expose the ghost voters that exist there. By pulling it down every other time that there is an anomaly, it means you don't want the very many anomalies to be exposed.
Thank you.
The other issue, you all know that CORD and now NASA opposed KPMG in terms of auditing this register, and CORD lost the case on a technicality. Now KPMG went on ahead to audit this register, and by their own preliminary report, they indicated that they believe that as many as 1 million dead voters might be in this register. The question is, what has IEBC done about it? The other issue that Salim mentioned is that the Elections Amendment Act made it very clear that once KPMG was done with the auditing of the register, it was to be submitted to IEBC, which would in turn submit it to Parliament. It is true that Parliament has gone on recess, but Parliament as an institution still functions, unlike the old constitution in which the president could prorogue Parliament and Parliament would not sit until the election. Under these circumstances, Parliament has just adjourned according to the constitutional provisions sine die. What that basically means, the clerk of the National Assembly is there, the Speaker of the National Assembly is there. Parliament is operational even without members of Parliament being there.
Okay,
And
thank you very much, Adam. Okay. Well, thank you again, and I'll join Katie in now.